So I want to talk about another useful orientation, useful practice, useful caution on the path, and could see it as, I'll just say what it is. Avoiding gossiping, not gossiping. You could see it as a very useful upgrade in one's experience, in one's life, in one's journey, in one's healing path. Gossip is a very dangerous pattern. Once you recognize kind of the fundamental addictive avoidance patterns, or that template of avoidance and of defense mechanisms, once you have that kind of foundational understanding of those dynamics, you can sort of just apply that to so many different realms of distortion or dysfunction. And so that's sort of the background to all of this, kind of the undergirding context is the addictive pattern, the avoidance pattern, that which keeps us in an aversive state, an avoidant state to our pain. And so in that context, you think about all the addictive routes, all the addictive patterns that we have, using relationship to avoid pain, using whatever your digital devices to avoid pain, using pot, using whatever it is, work, it's just endless. Sex, exercise, heavier drugs, alcohol, all those paths. Gossip, I would slot it into this same category. It's another one of those patterns that we have that allows us to stay in motion. It's like the addictive patterns thrive on avoidance, and avoidance means movement. Because as we kind of tried to touch upon in other videos, the healing path is facilitated by a fundamental stillness, a fundamental commitment to stopping, to burning, to metabolizing, to stopping, to being still. But the addictive patterns keep you on the treadmill. I just recently heard somebody use that term, the hedonic treadmill, always looking into the future for satisfaction. Future arrives, satisfaction is fleeting at best, and you're just back on that treadmill. So the healing path is the counter movement, which is not a motion, it's stopping. Surrender, there's a good word for it, a willingness to surrender, to feel. But gossip is one of these patterns that locks in that movement, reinforces the cycle of dissatisfaction. And it's sort of like we become so identified with the quest for satisfaction and the quest for external relief that becomes kind of our persona or our identity. And so gossip sort of shores up that identity. It relies on it's another externalization of pain. So it's like you've got some kind of conflict with somebody, or just the internal judgment of somebody else's actions, or whatever. I mean, yeah, there's just a million reasons why it would come up, but you could say underlying that movement of gossip, that pattern of gossip, is a kind of fear, feeling threatened, and so it's a defense mechanism against that threat. Very, very destructive, and easy to slip into. I think, and this is going to sound perhaps, well, I can imagine it's not going to sound great, but I think it tends to be, talking broad brushstrokes here, a more female pattern. You know, I remember hearing a teacher talk about, not exclusively female, obviously, but I remember hearing somebody talk about in a podcast that she had this big kind of spiritual blowout, spiritual awakening, and she was kind of looking around at the world around her and could kind of feel into the psychological state, the emotional state of the people around her, and she said she was shocked just to see it so directly, that what she noticed was that kind of the male tendency was, she would look around at the men around her and just see deadness, just kind of numbness, deadness, a lack of emotional vitality. I can't remember her exact words, but I think it was something like deadness. And that when she would look at the women, the kind of overriding trait that characterized a lot of the women she would see when she was walking around was neuroticism, just an overabundance of emotional activity and kind of the mind going wild. And yeah, I don't doubt that, and in my experience that kind of rings true. Now, you don't want to universalize to the point that you don't allow for individual difference ever, not just with this, but ever. But I think in general, and even if you don't want to associate it necessarily with a particular woman or a particular man, but if you think about it just in the kind of more abstract, that is a more, I guess, masculine tendency to numb out, to become dead inside. And the opposite end of that spectrum, just energetically, would be neuroticism, an overabundance of mental energy, emotional energy. So I guess that's maybe part of why I'm thinking that gossip is not just only women doing it, but I think it tends to be one of the pitfalls, or one of the more common obstacles on the path that is a little bit more female valenced, or feminine, female valenced. But all of us have, both polarities. So it's a tendency that can arise irregardless of one's biological inheritance, or irregardless of one's biology. And I think there's also probably some biological reasons why that kind of socially destructive form of interaction might have, in general terms, might be more prevalent in one gender versus another, but that's all kind of beside the point. But it's very destructive. It's a very destructive pattern, because what it tends to do is it reinforces a kind of connection with the person who you're sharing. It's like a false kind of intimacy. You're bringing in one person, but in opposition to, or almost triangulating against, somebody else. So it can feel really good to be within that gossip context. That's kind of the drug hit the hedonic treadmill, the addictive high it can feel really good because you're creating this shared bond of what seems like intimacy, what can feel like intimacy, but ultimately is unhealthy. But there's always a major shadow and a major cost to that intimacy because you're causing harm psychically, energetically, and actually to the person that's being gossiped about. But more importantly, or as important, or just in that equation, to yourself. It ultimately is just going to reinforce your separation from God. It's not, and you hear it when you listen with any kind of depth, or you kind of survey spirituality in the different traditions. Most traditions have, if not outright prohibitions, definitely cautions against gossip because of how caustic it is, how destructive it is, how deleterious it is to social fabric and to relationships. But it kind of creates this sense of safety that we're all looking for. If I can make this person bad, then I'm right. If I can bring somebody else in on this kind of conspiracy, this gossip train, then I've got more protection from them also. So there's some deep things happening that aren't necessarily immediately apparent on the surface. And if that's your habitual way of being in the world, then it really takes a conscious effort and an upgrade. It's a huge upgrade once you make that commitment. But just like with any addiction, if you just completely take that defense strategy out, without any, just like cold turkey, without any compensating healthy strategy or healing, then it's going to be very hard. That's why going cold turkey is such a challenge. It certainly is possible. It's on some level, it can be a matter of the depth of your suffering, depth of your commitment, that you can just sometimes, just like with the Zen sword, or just with a sword, you can cut out bad habits just like that. That is possible. But what you want to do, it kind of works hand in hand, is when you feel what happens, it always comes from the fundamental levels, the subtler levels of creation, and moves upwards into the more superficial level. So from the energetic, emotional, feeling level into the discursive, mental level, mental chatter level. And so beneath that compulsion to gossip and to make others wrong and to kind of spread that toxic energy is a undigested, uncomfortable feeling. And so the way to overcome gossip, you can white knuckle it through willpower, and I definitely suggest you make that commitment and put that as a value, and just trust that life will be a lot better without being a gossip. But the real healing happens by going into the difficult emotion. Just like with every other addictive pattern, every other unhealthy pattern, it's about feeling what is being denied within you, what you're avoiding feeling. So somebody hurt you, touched something in you. Rather than gossiping, why not step back into the anger, feel the upset, not the labels of it. The mind tries to protect itself, does this dance where it tries, that's the whole defensive strategy, is it tries to keep you up on the surface level of the mind. And so what we're doing here is stopping and allowing these deeper layers to emerge. And even at you could say at a maybe, I don't know if it's more advanced level, but there's the passive stopping and letting these things emerge and feeling them. And then as you get more experience, you can sink into that level, into the emotional level. And the whole process here is just burning, feeling the feeling and not moving, allowing the anger to come up, and not running back into the mind, not running back into the needing to spread the energy externally, but letting it burn off through you, feeling the anger, clenching your fists, shaking. I've said this before, but if you're driving or you're out in nature, or I guess even at your house, you can scream into a pillow or something, but if you're in a place where you can just let out a deep, visceral, what do they call that? Primal scream, that can help. Punching the air, getting physical. Obviously doing it in a contained and safe way. That's the whole thing here. You don't want to hurt yourself or other people. And you'll find, and a lot of people talk about this, that under the anger, or mixed in with the anger, there's sadness. There could be a feeling of betrayal, feeling of loneliness, feeling of fear. There can be all these difficult emotions. But you recognize the more you do this, that the emotions are just energy. It's not going to kill you, and in fact, it's going to free you. It's going to bring you to life. It's going to liberate you, to allow these things to come up, to cry, to express, to feel, and to let it burn through you. Learn to burn. Feel it to heal it. Let it burn through you. And see, once you've addressed those deeper layers, the upper layer is just a reflection of what's going on at a deeper level. So if you're trying to fix it up here, you're just doing very cosmetic rearranging of like the leaves of a tree. You're just at the very most superficial level. You got to go down into the root, and you heal it at the root by feeling it. It's not a mental analytical process. Feel it in your body. You cry, you shake, you clench, you whatever you need to do to let that energy move. And that's already huge. That's already huge. That's an already huge way to important step in moving this energy and lessening the need to gossip. See, gossiping ultimately, just like every other addiction, is a kind of self-medication. It's serving a certain purpose, not a good purpose, ultimately not a healthy purpose, very destructive tendency. It's like a counterfeit healing. So what we want to do is deep healing, real healing. And so that's one thing. You know, another thing that comes up for me, I love Christianity and especially the Gospels. And I think it's Matthew 8. I think it's somewhere in the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus talks about if a brother has harmed you or sinned against you or wronged you, that you go directly to them. See, the ego fears that. Ego doesn't want to hear that, because it means that you are going to have to be, you put yourself out there. You have to show some vulnerability. You have to show some courage. You have to show some strength. And you go directly to the person. If it's bad enough that you feel like you have to spread negativity and gossip about somebody, that should be a clue that it might be worthwhile, especially if this is somebody that you're going to interact with a lot, or somebody that you value in your life, to go and have a direct conversation with them. And that's difficult. That's really difficult. And it's a really important part of development as a human, psychologically. Now there's a number of shades of nuance here, because not every experience needs to be worked out that way. A lot of it can be worked out, and ultimately is worked out, doing this inner work, finding the places where you're stuck inside, where you're hurting, healing those, attending to those, digesting those. But it's certainly a step in the right direction if instead of gossiping about somebody, instead of saying something negative about somebody, you talk to them directly and say, you know, this really hurt. I was really upset when this happened. I don't understand why this happened. Or, you know, yeah, just approaching them, you know, I'd like to express something that's coming up for me, and I'd like to talk about it directly. And see, there's a whole skill set in doing this kind of thing as well that you never really master, because it's, you know, human interaction is fraught with challenge, but you can learn to kind of stay in your own energy, express what's hurting, be honest, do it in a humble way, do it in a respectful way, in a kind way, in a direct way that's respectful to the person you're talking to, but also respectful to you and how you're feeling. And you know, you have to people, especially if they matter to you and they're worthwhile in your life, and you do it in a way that is humble and clear and courageous, often you'll be surprised, not always, but often you'll be surprised, or let's say sometimes, I think probably often you'll be surprised that there is a kind of openness to it, that you can feel the sort of mutual flow of how it humanizes, because you've got these monsters in your mind, and when you're face to face with somebody, there's a way that it kind of humanizes the process. And you can even say things like, I want to share this because it matters to me to be honest and to be authentic and to be real and to be direct. And some people, if they're really mature, can hear that and they'll feel respected that you came to them. A lot of problems in relationships, some of them at least, are misunderstandings. But there's kind of dignity that comes forth inside of you with being direct with somebody, and a kind of power and a kind of stillness. Now, you don't want to get into the dynamic of needing to hash it out with somebody, needing them to react a certain way, needing it to go a certain way for you to find relief. That's another potential danger. But yeah, you can approach something humbly and say, are you open to feedback? Are you open to me expressing something? And best you can, be calm, be centered, be authentic. Express that it hurts, something you said really hurt, I'm really upset about this. And if you want an apology, you can ask for it. You can say it would really be helpful if it feels authentic to you to offer an apology. Sometimes people just offer an apology. Sometimes it's enough just to share what's going on. So there's a whole number of sub skills within here that you just develop through trial and error, and never perfectly. And some people will just not be open to it and will attack back. And that's a skill too, staying rooted in what's true for you and staying focused. It's like there's an energetic stillness that can come over you. You know, you can say somebody's being really rude. You can say you're coming across really harsh right now. You're coming across really disrespectful. I'd appreciate a kinder tone. I mean, it all depends on the level of connection that you have with somebody. And so I guess that's all relevant in the context of gossip, because that can be another way to eliminate the need or the compulsion to gossip, is getting better at talking directly with people. You know, and the other thing is just be gentle with yourself. You're just doing the best you can. We get frustrated, we get pissed off. Talk to God, He's a great ear. Get pissed off, like blame up to God. Like, why the fuck am I going through this, man? What are you doing to me down here? What the hell's going on? And just vent and be just simple and vent to God. That's a safe ear to gossip too. A counselor, somebody in a therapeutic context, that's somebody to blow off steam to. And if they're skilled, they won't get tangled up in it. They'll kind of probably say some similar things that, I'm trying to say now, but will help to guide you. But if it's just you're gossiping amongst your friend group, be very skeptical at a minimum that you're on the right path. I'll just say that's not the right path. That's not going to lead you anywhere good. It feels good temporarily, and it can shore up a certain false sense of intimacy, but ultimately can be very dangerous. Yeah. I want to stress that men and women can both be neurotic and gossip, and I just have noticed, and I think, in a general sense, it's like each gender kind of has different ways of defending and different strategies and certain tendencies. Again, not universally, but kind of in aggregate, or looking at the kind of mean or the average. But it is a major upgrade of one's path, especially if that's a big challenge, is recognizing that this tendency is an opportunity to go deeper, that there's something deeper that wants to be healed and transformed. Not easy, not comfortable, but definitely possible. And you feel just more settled, you feel less paranoia. You tend to tolerate. It just tends to kind of clear things out of your path that you don't need. And that can settle your nervous system, settle your mind, bring more peace. So anyways,